Well, good morning. This is Kels Goodman. I'm beaming in from Utah and where the weather's getting better. And right here to the right of me is, I can almost touch him, even though he's all the way in Palmyra, is Mark Burris. How's it going, Mark? Give us a hello.
Hello.
Oh my goodness. Calm down there, Mark. I'm telling you. So he's over there with me, my cohort here on the Hidden in the Heartland podcast. And today we're going to cover a fun little topic. And we won't be long today. We won't take too much time. This is a short story, but I felt it was important to kind of go into this a little bit because of where we're reading right now. For those of you who read the Book of Mormon according to the Come Follow Me timeline, you know that right now we're in the section uh, of Mosiah where we are talking about King Noah and his priests. And there's a fun story that's kind of related, not totally related, but somewhat related to a Native American tale from the past. And that's what we're just going to kind of go into a little bit today. And I kind of did a little bit of expanded research on it and I wanted to talk about it. And if you, as you are our viewers, if you know more about this, please go more into it. I don't claim to know it all, especially Native American studies, but the Native American studies are what's important when it comes to the continual search of who lived in America long before Columbus. Because again, that's what I'm trying to say is that that is our study. Our study is to find out who lived here long before Columbus and what do we know? Not necessarily what did Joseph Smith say, even though that's important. You know, when we talk about uh, uh, Book of Mormon evidence or uh, ancient American evidence and things like ancient American studies. We love to kind of go with the angle of what do we see archaeologically, what do we hear historically. Um, while Joseph Smith gives us great connections, because what we're doing is we're talking about the revelations of Joseph Smith and receiving this Book of Mormon and these plates and to help kind of verify them. But for the most part, we want some like hard evidence that is under the ground or historical things like that. That's kind of what we're aiming for. And then of course the native stories. Is there a connection there? That's what we're after. And so I wanted to give a little shout out before we go forward. Now, many of you know Wayne May. Wayne May's a good guy. Um, I think Wayne's had some of his stuff over there by you, right, Mark? Didn't Wayne have some artifacts over there in Palmyra?
Yeah, in the bookstore that I managed, we used to house his collection.
Yeah,
So we had a museum and in the store, and he has some pretty amazing pieces. So
yeah, he does. It's really awesome. He's got especially that axe head or that hammer head that's still in the mold,
the
whatever
Iron
the
Hammerhead,
device
yeah.
was.
Mhm.
That's amazing, isn't it? And it's really heavy. When you lift it, it's like it's evidence that there was smelting up in a certain area.
Yeah,
Um,
that one, and then he had several artifacts that had woolly mammoths carved on them. So those
oh yeah,
were those are some things that were pretty amazing. Um, I he also had a copper plate with engravings on it, and I had the opportunity to move the items a few times so that to be able to handle each item was an amazing experience for me.
yeah.
Just
So,
kind of,
is it
wow.
while you were dusting around it to clean the place? So,
Well, so they were originally housed in a hotel in Palmyra,
oh, that's right.
and I had to move them over to my store. So, packing them up, And then when my store closed, I had to pack them up a second time. So
Yeah.
I was able to handle them a few times. And, sometimes I do special family home evenings where I'd take out an artifact or two and let people look at it. So
Yeah. That's
don't tell
really
anybody,
cool.
but hey, you know.
No, that's awesome. I love those, and that's he's pretty lucky for the artifacts that he has, and I think it's a good collection. Well, the reason why I bring up Wayne is because Wayne has a conference coming up, and his conference is called the Land of Promise. And the thing is, what's cool about this one, um, again, not to knock the Firm Foundation one, because the Firm Foundation conference has a lot of great material, when a lot of great speakers that come every April and October when they have those. When we used to attend those, um, but the only challenge that has happened through time with the Firm Foundation is that they're doing less and less Book of Mormon evidence, and it's more a myriad of other things. When I used to go to the conference, and I when I first attended like 11 years ago is when I went to my first Firm Foundation conference. I would see Rod would talk about the great stuff, and then Wayne would get up and speak. And a lot of times Wayne came with his knowledge and his I guess, string of material that came from the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society that he was part of. And
Mhm.
and now I'm part of it, and I try to go. And it's that conference that happens in October, which I've told people is an amazing conference because nobody there is Mormon, and except for Wayne. And I think one other guy is there. I forgot his name. I feel bad because we've talked, and he's a great guy. But that's it. And then Dave Lindsley actually spoke there this last October. Great conference up in Michigan in October. If you're interested in Book of Mormon evidence, real Book of Mormon, like real ancient American evidence, I guess I should probably clarify. That's where you go, and it's fascinating. They're very respectful of members of the church, so that's
I'll,
where
I'll,
Wayne gets a lot of his information. So
yeah, also, Wayne is the editor of the Ancient American magazine,
that's right.
and I get the magazine, so I think it comes out. I don't know if it comes out quarterly.
I
Uh,
think it's quarterly.
Not sure
Yeah,
how often it comes
or
out,
at
but
least every other month or something like that. So
everybody that's part of that, the Ancient American like society, that meets in Michigan, that's where they submit articles as to his magazine.
yeah,
So it's really really amazing. If you get a chance to subscribe to his magazine, do it.
yeah,
You read through these articles and all these submissions and all these things that are being found in North America, and it has Central and South America stuff as well. But when
yeah. His magazine's the name has changed
oh
to the magazine. I think I forgot what it's called. I feel bad. Wasn't planning on talking about the magazine. I think it's called Land of Promise magazine. I or
Well, I
something
think
like that.
he has he has two. I think the Land of Promise is the one that focuses on the Latter-day Saint
Yeah,
aspect. And
yeah,
then the
that's
Ancient
right.
American, but even when you read through the Ancient American magazine, you'll find article after article of things that parallel Book of Mormon. And you kind of you have to read and have a filing cabinet in your brain where you file the information away, and then while you're reading the Book of Mormon, you're like, wow, I remember reading that in
That's
Ancient
right.
America, and it's really cool. I think from the Ancient American magazine, I've probably made more connections, evidence wise, than any other source.
Yeah,
Uh, Wayne Wayne's been at it for a really really long time, really humble guy, and what I like about Wayne is that all the stuff that he does around the Book of Mormon, it's not like that's not how he makes his living. It's
Yeah.
from the Ancient American magazine. He keeps it kind of separate, and he's done that for a really, really good reason. But yeah, if you ever get a chance to watch Wayne, to listen to him or read anything that he's written, he's solid.
Yeah.
So
He's on my show a few times. He's provided a lot of information on Hidden in the Heartland. You can scroll back on this channel, and there's a couple of interviews as the thumb goes up. Look at that. And
mhm.
sorry, I don't know how to, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how to turn that off. But you scroll back a little bit, and you're able to see some interviews of Wayne, like extended interviews. And then also, he is embedded in a few episodes. And there's a few things that Wayne and I that I disagree with that Wayne, from some of his research, but that's part of the research is you find things that you agree with and you don't agree with. But for the most part, Wayne has great content, and you're not supposed to agree with every little thing that is said. You're supposed to do your
He
own
he's
research.
kind of the guy that started, in my opinion, he started the Heartland movement, at least in this part
Yeah.
of the 2000s. There were earlier, you have Willard Bean and quite a few, and pretty much all the early members of the church. But Wayne
Yeah.
is the guy that kind of resurrected that. Um, a lot of people might consider Rod to be, the poster boy or whatever, but I would consider it to be Wayne.
Yeah, and Wayne
So
was doing it. I mean, even in the '90s. I mean,
yeah,
he was like late '80s, early '90s. He was the one going to BYU, trying to convince. And that's kind of been the challenge, I think, is you've seen uh, why the discrepancy that we've had with BYU and the farms and whatever they're called today, now Book of Mormon Central, where he's been able to try to go and build a bridge. And I think maybe sometimes when you go up to a group like that and you try to challenge sort of the norm, which was Central America, Mesoamerica, you have a tendency to be in the cookie zone. And I think that that's something Wayne has fought with for a long time, and Rod also fought with, because for a while when you would go onto a farm's website, it seemed like every other article was about why is Wayne wrong, why is Rod wrong, and not just, hey, let's just stick to the evidence. Because that's me. I just want to stick to the evidence. I don't want to play a game of whose side we're on or anything. And if there's something that's not correct, and like I'm gonna continue to harp on this one thing, and if you guys hate me after this, so be it. But like I'm still not sold on Zarahemla being near Nauvoo, on that land across the water. I'm not sold. That's just not me. Um, but some people believe that, and that's great. I just don't believe it. But there's so many other things that we can agree on, and let's focus on those things that we can find, because that's what makes the research what it is. It's a level of humanities that is not going to be perfect, is by any means. It's not a perfect science. It's something that you have to be able to be ready to be wrong, or to be ready to change or to shift, and that's what you do. Now, Wayne is really, I think he provides a lot of great content, and that's why I wanted to talk about his conference, his Book of Mormon conference, um, which is June 21 and 22, and it's down in Spanish Fork. It's at the high school there, Maple Mountain High School. I think that's the new high school that they just built in Spanish Fork. But if you're in Utah, June 1st and June 21st and 22nd, I'm an amazing announcer. I know I would be so fired if I had to work for somebody announcing things. But anyway, and then there's a website called ldsarchaeology.com. /events. And so that's where you can go to get tickets, or just you can find it on, it's easy search, Land of Promise, Book of Mormon Conference in Spanish Fork. Anyway, so there you go. And Wayne, good luck with the conference. I'll actually be there. I'm not speaking because I don't really have anything new to really go over. I mean, I have a lot I could talk about, but I actually will have a booth there. But I'm going to do read. I'm trying to kind of get to know where everybody's at. It's been a while since I've been to a conference. It's been a long time, and we have a booth there because I have a company called Your Legacy Videos, and it's a company that started with a friend of mine named Doug Crockett, and he's going to be there on the booth talking about um, how a system that we're putting together where we're able to record people's family history, life in a professional documentary manner. And so Your Legacy Videos, that's another plug, shameless, I guess. And you can actually go on to yourlegacyvideos.com and you can see what we do and how we do it. So it's really kind of fun. Very, very ancestry, family search kind of material, where we sit and we interview people who are kind of at the later part of their lives and they want to tell their story, and we flood it with photos and videos, and it'll look like an episode of Hidden in the Heartland because I helped shoot it. So it's kind of fun. So anyway, there's your plugs for the day. What I wanted to do is go into our story today, and that is the story of the Nicotani. And the Nicotani, it's funny, when I did search on the Nicotani, all that came up was the movie Die Hard, and that's because the building is called the Nicotami building, or Nakatomi uh, building, that gets exploded in the movie Die Hard, and so that kept coming up, and I had to keep being very careful how I spell Nicotani in order to get the information, but we were able to do a little research, and so I'm gonna screen share here. I'm gonna attempt to do this without any muffly fluffily. So here we go. So here's the story of the Nicotani, and away we go. Who has heard of the Nicotani? Have you heard of the Nicotani, Mark? Nope. That's new to you, huh? So it is new to me until I did the Hidden in the Heartland episode. So if you the reason why I wanted to bring this one up is because, this week we're reading in the book of Mosiah about Abinadi going up against the big fat ugly King Noah, which is kind of how we depict him. He could have been, who knows what he could have looked like, but this is our imagination of what he would look like. And then Abinadi, of course, preaching to him and his priests, because he had a series of priests. That was the form of their government, was that he was a king, and then he'd have his priests, and that would justify his having the law of Moses to live by, so to speak, and blended in with the government. But then he got rid of the priests that his dad set up, of course, Zenith, and then he brought in these wicked priests, and they all lived riotous living with women and things like that. And so, which is kind of sad. And they obviously used their priesthood for negative purposes. And so, and one of those became, of course, they got run off, and then there's the story of the 24 Lamanite women that we read in Mosiah. I think it's 22 or 23, but that's the reading of the week. And so what was I felt would be fun was to talk about a native story that is a possible, really kind of pretty distant, but our good friend Franklin Keel, if you guys remember him, and he is an awesome fellow, and we get to see Franklin every time he's from Colorado right now, but for a while Franklin was the one of the leaders of the Bureau of Indian Affairs for the U.S. government. So he was a very respected Native American who's got really his head on straight as far as being LDS and being Native American. And he really built good relations with the natives and and we spent a lot of we've he's since retired. And when we interviewed him 10 years ago for Hidden in the Heartland, he was at kind of the point of retirement. And so because of that, he could speak a little freer about the things that he knew, but he was still very respectful. And we still see him. We actually saw him just a few months ago. He comes to Utah once in a while. We go out to dinner and we talk about native stories and things like that. And so he shares with us the story of the Nicotani that is very much like the priests of Noah and some of their wicked practices. And so I think that this is what we're going to draw a little from is from Franklin Keel. And if you go to the Cherokee Museum, which I actually have not been, but it's on my list to go to the Cherokee Museum in North Carolina. It's in the town of Cherokee, North Carolina, and you'll see a lot of great artifacts, a lot of great native stories, things like that that I've been reading about. And that is where you learn the a story of the Nicotani, and you'll see this sort of plaque that kind of goes into it. And I wanted to kind of review a little bit of it while we were here. And I so the Nicotani were an ancient priesthood amongst the Cherokee people. And it's interesting that they use the word priesthood amongst them. According to Cherokee legend, the you can either say Nicotani or Anikutani. It's like Anikutani. And they were slain during a massive uprising by the Cherokee because they were mad at these priests. Approximately, and they kind of estimate it to be about 300 years ago, or I'm sorry, 300 years before European contact, which would probably take that at about 1100 or so, maybe 100 AD. But there are some places where they think that it would have been an older story. And we know that the priests of Noah is probably around, I think it was 140 BC, 120 BC. I can't remember the exact date, but it's around that time frame is when the actual story of the Noah and his priests happened. But and a lot of what you're learning from here is from this guy, James Mooney. So first off, what I'm going to do is kind of talk a little bit about James Mooney. Now, he's a character that we can probably draw a lot of great information from in future studies. Um, he's probably similar to John Wesley Powell, but he's a little friendlier towards the natives. You know, John Wesley Powell loved to kind of keep the natives, I feel like, at least from the studies that we've done, keep the natives sort of down here and keep the Americans kind of up here. And he even though he was friendly to them and he studied with them, I think he still had that kind of separation. And I don't know if that was personal or if that was something that the government told him to keep it that way. But but James Mooney was an ethnographer who lived for several years. He actually lived with the Cherokee, and he also was he was the bureau. He worked for the Bureau of American Ethnology, and he worked under John Wesley Powell. So he was basically one of his cohorts, and he had some he studied the ghost dance, which is a spiritual movement amongst the Native American groups. And if you've ever heard of the ghost dance, from what I understand, again, those who are watching, correct me or add to it of what you know. The ghost dance is sort of this dance that was happening when they were having these struggles with, American relations, with the relations of these Europeans who were coming and taking over their lands. The ghost dance was sort of something that they would do that in hopes of being able to kind of repent and to get good with God so that they can get rid of these darn Americans who are coming in to take over, or these Europeans that
That's
actually were coming
that
in.
that's one of the things that I consider to be quite a large evidence of the Book of Mormon
Mhm.
is that when the Book of Mormon talks about what will happen to the Lamanites,
Yeah,
and it's almost word for word what happened to the Native Americans, and you look at the populations of Central and South America, wasn't, those same things didn't happen.
right.
The Europeans really intermingled with that populace, and of course, yeah, they burned the books and the things they did to the Mayans and the Aztecs, but really it's North America where you see, you know, the Native Americans being treated the prophetic way that the Book of Mormon outlines is that same thing. Um,
Very
it's
good point.
it's
Yeah,
huge. Yeah.
that's a very good point, Mark.
And
Yeah,
sometimes we
that's
want to take as evidence, like we want to look at a rock or we want to look at, you know, an oral history, but when you can look at how the different tribes were treated, and it's definitely that. Um, something that from Wilford Woodruff, he said that he had a hard time with all the prophecies of the prophet Joseph. He had a hard time believing that the Lamanites would blossom like a rose, and he was one of those men that went out to the Native Americans and taught them. Right after the Book of Mormon being published, Wilford was one of the men that went on missions to the Lamanites, and it was, the different missions that Brigham Young sent people out to the Lamanites, and we are seeing many members of the tribes join the church now. It's happening, and it's slow, but it's happening. So
well, that's a really good point, Mark. In fact, I try to not go into the Joseph said side of the evidence because I know that's more evidence that's North American, Central American. But that you bring that good point, and if you want evidence of what Joseph said about where the Book of Mormon happened, he obviously didn't say much, but if you go to the Doctrine and Covenants, and every time they talk about taking the gospel to the Lamanites, it was never in Central or South America. It was always right near Joseph. It was always in New York, or it was in Missouri, or it was, on the edge of the United States, which was Missouri at the time. That's where the actions happened when it came to those relations that Joseph had with the natives.
yeah, it seemed like they focused on very specific groups of people to bring the gospel to. Um,
Um,
there's a large portion, the Joseph Smith papers released the minute book of the Council of 50, and we're not going to get into the Council of 50 right now. It's one of the things I really will geek out about. But there's a large portion of these minutes of the Council of 50 where they spend time talking about the Native American tribes and teaching them the gospel and how to do that, and the process of that and how important it was. Um, so you have the Council of 50 that's there to prepare the world for the second coming of Christ, a government that would be set up. And for some reason, a large focus that they have is the Native Americans and making sure they get taught the gospel, because that has to happen before the second coming of Christ.
yeah.
Um,
It's kind of interesting. One thing I've noticed is I remember in the 70s, um, there was a kind of a push of the natives, the Native American, calling them the Lamanite generation, and there were organizations that were, Native American, um, Mormons and things like that, talking about bringing the gospel. A lot of that is gone.
mhm.
That a lot of that doesn't exist much anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
it seems like we've almost erased the word Lamanite from our vocabulary completely.
yeah,
Um, Even, I served my mission in South America, and it was really something that wasn't spoken of even in South America. And, you'll have people that will talk about temple dedicatory prayers, Kirtland Temple, which is kind of the outline of dedicatory prayers. It mentions the Lamanites.
yeah,
So that first temple, and there are temples both in Canada and in, south of the Rio Grande where it's mentioned. And I think that's more of, hey, Heavenly Father, please remember the promises that were made to this group of people that they will receive the gospel. I think it's a broad thing that we do during temple dedications to remember that
yeah,
promise that was made to that people. But that I mean it's very telling that they went to very specific places and taught very specific people. And when you read of the interactions that they had with the tribes, and the tribes are like, hey, we were waiting for you, and hey, we have these histories of this and this and this and this and this, and it ties in with the Book of Mormon. And luckily we do have these things that are written down, because I honestly believe that a large portion of the North American Native American history has been erased.
yeah.
But luckily, these first missionaries went out and taught these people, and they wrote what they said in return.
That's right.
And the reaction to that, the reaction saying, "Oh yeah, the Great Spirit told us you would come and you'd give us this history." And like, to circle back to Wayne May, he does a really great job of tying into the tribes and the things that they said. I've met members of the tribes, like I met a guy from the Mohawk tribe, and the stuff he told me, he was involved with kind of the upper circle of the Mohawk tribe, and the stuff he told me, I was just like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
And a lot of times Native Americans won't share their sacred history with you unless they trust you, and they have a real hard time trusting um
yeah. You have to
European
really
white
build
white
the
white
trust.
Europeans, yeah. So they have a hard time trusting, and they have a hard time sharing that history, because we kind of decided their history for them.
Hmm.
Well, you came across on the Bering Strait, and this is who you are. We've decided for you, rather than letting them
Yeah,
tell us who they are, where they came from, and their history, and all those different things. And you had mentioned before we started filming, the correlation between tribes burying their weapons, and that
yeah,
being a story in the Book of Mormon. And I would love to see a project where we could go in and we could find, and I'm sure that there are examples of every story that's in the Book of Mormon,
yeah.
that we can find a parallel with the North American tribes.
Yeah, that's why the stop to a place like the Cherokee Museum would be great to go in and study the stories, to find out, and even one-on-one conversations with certain natives that help continue, and to get them honest, because I tell you, I hate to say this, but there's sometimes, you, because you want honest stories. You don't want somebody saying, you don't want an LDS Native American to give their, we've got
Their
really good
card.
relations with great natives, such as, like I said, Franklin Keel, and then the LaFontaines, who are awesome. And they've been really good connectors. Um, when it comes to the native stories and connecting them with the Book of Mormon. Uh, there are others who I think have connected, and I don't know if they're completely honest about their in other
You,
words, there's not a Mormon
you,
slant already
yeah,
in
you
the,
definitely you want someone that
you
doesn't
want
have
the
skin in
raw
the game.
story. That's right.
Yeah, you want someone that
So
doesn't have skin in the game, and you want it to come out naturally.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we have this way of like wanting something so bad that we'll curve it to the way
Yeah.
that we want it rather than letting it speak for itself. And I think that if you let the stories speak for themselves and we can listen and we can document, I I'm confident that we're going to find the parallels without even saying, oh, well, we're going to find these Native Americans that are members of the church now, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Um, the more and more that I found, I mean, there's a book out there called He Walked the Americas.
Yeah.
It's an excellent book.
Great book.
And it,
Yeah.
and it, you know what, it does talk about both North and South America. And I had a discussion the other day about the third fold. So when Christ visited the Nephites, he said, and other sheep I have which are not of the fold of Jerusalem and not of this fold, and
Yeah.
them too shall I bring. So it documents, the third fold as well as the second fold, the fold of the Nephites.
Yeah.
Um, but like I would just hope that, we'd be able to document. And at the age that we have now, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a TikTok channel or a YouTube channel of the oral histories of the Native Americans?
Yeah. Yeah.
That we could learn that and we could finally find the respect that we should have for these people, you
Well,
know?
on the fold discussion, that's true. That's why I keep telling people about Central America, that I salute the research done in Central America. I think it's amazing, and I think it's been great, and I think it's been good for the people involved. And I believe Christ visited Central America. There's
Mhm.
evidence of Christ visiting Central America. I just don't see the evidence that they're the Nephites.
Yeah,
You can give the same story of the tree of life to other groups, not just to Lehi. Lehi isn't the only one that probably has had a tree of life vision. So if you see evidence of a tree of life vision down there, that doesn't necessarily mean Lehi was the one who got it.
yeah.
And
And
so,
it's also interesting that like when you look at the story of the Savior appearing in Central America and South America, that it actually has more parallel with the stories of Christ appearing in Asia,
yeah,
appearing in Russia. Like you look at those stories and they're almost perfect parallels. Their stories have the same benchmarks that you look at. But when you look in North America, those stories talk about things that are very special, authority and things like that that are very, very unique
yeah,
to North America, which absolutely, it absolutely parallels the Book of Mormon and
yeah,
it talks
that's
about it.
right.
But I mean, I'm when we go back to Third Fold, that is a huge Book of Mormon evidence, absolutely huge because it supports when Christ says, "And other sheep I have, and I will go to them." It
Mhm.
supports the Book of Mormon story, just as the Book of Mormon is a huge supporter of the Bible. You
That's
know,
right.
it
Yeah,
there's a big part of the Book of Mormon that's like, hey, like this book, it's the Word of God, it's the Book of the Lamb,
yeah.
and this is what it went through, and it's.
Well, let's finish the story of the Nicotani. So, which I think will be one of those great connector stories to help, to help bring that. I think James Mooney, he or when you study the history, you see that James Mooney was responsible for the a book called Myths of the Cherokee. He wrote several books, and a lot of them were he studied Cherokee. What do you call it? Like a lot of their spiritual movements and things like that. The ghost dance was one that I was just mentioning. which would probably be another topic for another time. But basically, as we were saying before, it was all about, being worthy so that these invaders will not destroy them. And
It's
so,
interesting that they thought that they had to atone for something as well.
exactly.
So like
Yeah,
that goes back to that parallels Book of Mormon, where it's,
exactly.
hey, we realize that we did something bad in our past and we want to
Yeah.
atone for it.
So that's it. Yeah, it's very true. That's right. And so, and so James Mooney lived with the natives for a while, and so with the Cherokees for several years, and so he was able to probably build their trust, is what I'm assuming, and gain some of their stories. So the story of the Nicotani, basically in a nutshell, there were priests that went bad. They had a certain religion, and then they went ahead and lived against it. So one of the theories is one of the traditions of the Nicotani. They think that the Cherokee know so little about their identity, about so their origin is obviously in dispute. A few say that the ancient people who preceded the Cherokee built the mounds, is one of the theories that he brought here. While others, with more authority, they claim that they were a clan or a society in the tribe and were destroyed a long time ago by pestilence or another calamity. So that's interesting that they would think that the Cherokee might have been part of something else that was destroyed. And the Nicotani or the Nicotani most likely supervised religious ceremonies amongst the Cherokee. They may have been the mound builders who lived in the Appalachian lands, which the Cherokees settled. So Mooney's informants, I'm just going to kind of read through this, describe this group as much despised, corrupt abusers of their religious power. Mooney stated that they were so completely wiped out that even the mention of them uh, by the story and the legends were stated to be centuries old, but it's definitely possibly older, is what they're saying. So the mound builders, that's part of why the mound builders are the possible connection to Nephites is strictly because of timeline, because of what's found in the mounds and what's dated from the mounds, is possibly around the time of the Nephites, which would be 2,000 years ago. That's where they think that the remnants of the Cherokee come from. So anyway, so it's really interesting. The people long brooded in silence over the oppressions and outrages of this high caste whom they deeply hated but greatly feared. At length, a daring young man, a member of an influential family, organized a conspiracy among the people for the massacre of the priesthood. So now they're getting ready in this story, their legend, it tells them that they were getting ready to get rid of these priests that were doing them wrong. The immediate provocation was the abduction of the wife of the young leader who uh, who wanted to do the conspiracy against them. So the in this story, the priests came and abducted the wife of one of the guys who was conspiring to take over the priests. So, so little similarity. Again, the story's off, not totally perfect. His wife was remarkable for her beauty and was forcibly abducted and violated by one of the Nicotani while he was absent on the chase. On his return, he found no difficulty in exciting the others the resentment which he himself experienced. So many had suffered in the same way, so many feared that they might be made to suffer, that nothing was wanted but a leader appearing in the person of a young brave whom we have named. The people rose under this direction and killed every Nicotani, young and old. Thus perished a hereditary secret society, since which time no hereditary privileges have been tolerated amongst the Cherokee. So that's really fascinating. You know, when Alma was setting up the church, and when you read his requirements, and because they wanted a kingship, right? He was like, he literally, it's when you read it, he's Alma almost sounds paranoid. He's almost like, well, you can't trust anyone. You really can't. They've got to be a man of God. Otherwise, we're not going to do this king thing. We're not going to do it.
Mm.
And you see, and they constantly go back to this. Remember the priests of Noah? Remember those guys? That's why we're in this situation. That's why we're where we are. And they had that connection with God, knowing that if they those who really believed are like, if we mess up, guys, that means God's going to come down and do what he did, like the priests of Noah. Great example of what you see. And then of course abducting the women. This is a a string of a story that was similar, where a woman was abducted by the priests, in an effort to to change out what's going on. So very fascinating connection with the story of the Nicotani. I know there's a lot more to it. And if there's any of you in our audience knows more about the story of the Nicotani, please share it with us. And obviously we love to hear the native stories. There's many of them. But the story of the Nicotani is a nice connection, as well as the burial of weapons when we get to that point and reading the scriptures, which will be coming up in, I think, in a few months. But anyway, so there you go. There's a little bit of the story of the Nicotani, and hopefully you guys learned a little something today. Um, and we were able to make this connection with the Native Americans when it comes to studying who lived here long before Columbus. So anyway, thank you for joining us today. We'll continue to try to bring more episodes as we get closer to doing more things. We are busy people, but we also love to study the Heartland research. So thank you for joining with us today here on Hidden in the Heartland podcast.